Hi, this is Rob Garbus from Mainsaver. Today we're going to discuss things that you should do at the end of a year or the beginning of a new year inside of Mainsaver to help keep the database nice and clean. The first thing we're going to do is go into the maintenance module, and if we look at open work orders, we see in this database there's 397 work orders. So we should be able to look at the origination date and decide, well, do we want to clean these up? Do we want to go through each one? But there is this feature called mass close work orders, which is really nice, and you just hit this information applies to all work orders, put something like data cleanup, and it'll close out whatever work orders are open from the query. So you could do a query based on the date and then go ahead and close out the really old ones. They can be, you can also change it to canceled if you needed to instead of closed. The same thing is true for purchase orders. You might have a lot of open purchase orders that either were not fulfilled, they're going to be canceled, they're just out there. So what we're doing is we're looking at all the open purchase orders, and we can see that they're really old in this database. So they can be mass closed as well. There is a mass closed PO, or they can be individually closed, and this will say that the items have not been received. Do you want me to close it? And you can go ahead and do that. But you can also close the purchase order by receiving. There is the switch in System Admin that says close the purchase order when it's received in full. Now, I created a query that says the open POs that are received in full. In that case, I have a few that were just, for some reason or other, they were never closed out. And that's something I see frequently. And they can be closed manually very easily. And then they would, if I hit retrieve, it drops off the query. The next thing we can do is look at the asset records. And one of the things that often happens is that assets are taken out of service, the status is changed, and for some reason they're never put back in service. So right here I have a query. Basically it says asset status is not ISF, which is in service full. And I can see here I have some that are out of service, and maybe this one's supposed to be in service. So I'll just go ahead, edit that, and put it back in service full. And when I hit OK, it tells me that it was taken out quite a long time ago. So and there's the downtime. So we have kind of some artificial downtime because of that data. So that's the next thing to do, is to clean up your assets. It's a good time to set up your asset hierarchy. Oftentimes when you receive a special order item, if it's not ordered against the work order, it ends up in what's called the special order items awaiting release. So those items can build up over time. Inside of the parts master, you can go under where it says reports and see these special order items awaiting release. And in this case, it's asking me to do a query. I'm just going to hit select all records and OK. So I have a lot of items, and down the bottom it should give me a grand total of $293,000. So these items were received but never issued to a work order, to an asset, or a cost center. And they could be issued back here under transactions and issue. And I'm just going to pick an arbitrary work order. And down here at the bottom where it says miscellaneous issue, I'm going to change that to special order all, and it shows me all of my special order items. And I can go ahead and put in the issue quantity on each one and hit issue, and then that item will get charged out and it will drop off of that list. And you can go through all the items and do that. Now the next thing is back here in the employee module. Personnel are often not updated, so what you have to do is, if this person is no longer working here, you need to go in and set them to TER, terminated and they will be filtered out from any queries when you do lookups. Okay. Another thing is if we have a mechanic, the charge rate that's applied to their time cards is kept here on the maintenance tab. So this mechanic doesn't have any charge rate. We usually recommend a fully burdened charge rate for the crafts because it shows up on all the history reports, the hours. So if you just have a fully burdened blanket rate for everybody, it doesn't have any confidential information in there. Okay. The next thing we'll do is in the PM module, so under preventive maintenance, first of all, if you have deactivated assets, you ought to check to make sure that the PM status is set to deactivated, or you can even delete any old PMs that aren't relevant anymore, because if they're in the system and they have an old date, it may look like they just haven't been done. So if you delete them or set them to deactivated, that indicates that they're no longer relevant. So in this case, the PM status, if I set it to deactivated, that would not generate. This default status here, sometimes people will come in here and set this to closed or canceled, but that default status is just for when the work order generates. So you want to make sure that's due, or in this case it's waiting scheduling. It's also a good time to look at your PM, look at the next create dates, look at the next due dates, make sure everything's up to date. Sometimes if you have open loop PMs, they get out of synchronization and they can be updated manually as long as there's not an open work order. So let's talk about system administration for a minute. There's several things you want to do. Number one is when you log on to the system on January 1st of the new year, oftentimes you get a message that says there are no budget periods for the current year. So if you go under settings, calendars, and budget period begin dates, I can see in this database I have 2015. I already have 2016, so I'm in good shape. You never want to change the calendar. You always want to use this duplicate button. And let's say I need to create 2017. I just put in the new year, hit OK, and it says, do you want to duplicate? Yes. And now I'm set up for 2017. Now another thing is that there is something called monthly closing in Mainsaver, and what that does is on the asset records it resets the month date totals, and on the parts master it resets your year-to-date counters for year-to-date usage. So if I look at this database and number one, if I hit my application switches, I can see what year that the closing was last done. In this case it was 2014. So to bring everything up to date, I'm going to go to monthly closing, and first I'm going to close out 2014 and hit this recalculate. And when I get this message, I'll just say no. I don't really look at the budgets much. And then I'm going to go in again, monthly closing. And now I'm in January 2015. I'm going to close out because today is the December 30th. So I'm going to close out November, recalculate year-to-date totals, and now I am all up to date. If you have a lot of transactions, that will take longer. So now I've got my calendars for next year, and January 1st I'll come back in and do monthly closing again. It's also a good idea to look at application security to make sure that people are set to have the proper permissions, and that's a wise thing to do if you're going to get audited. So under application security, number one, I can see each group and I can see the users of each group. But for each group, I'm going to make sure that the permissions are enabled or disabled as appropriate. Especially under general, things like generic add on the fly, you want to make sure that's disabled because that will let people add cost centers and accounts and things if they just type in new values. You want to make sure only certain people can create global queries and delete global queries. So going through application security is important. Also, under settings and employees' user profiles, you want to make sure that everyone is a member of a user group. And you'll notice that if I click OK here, it tells me that this user is not a member of a group. He needs to be assigned to a group. Because in Mainsaver, if you're not a member of a group, you won't have any restrictions. So you'll be able to mass close work orders, things like that. I will run this report called the under reports, the login ID and groups, and it'll show each user, and it'll show and make sure that they're a member of a certain group. So the next thing we'll talk about is posting time. So in the time card module, you want to make sure if you go to time and if you do a retrieve, usually there is a unposted query, and in this case everything's been posted, but you could just click the post button and go ahead and post all the time to make sure that it's charged out to your asset records as appropriate. Another thing you can do is go to your supplier records, and if you go into your, I'll go to purchasing module and go to suppliers, and there's some suppliers that you may deactivate because you're no longer doing business with. You can go through and either delete them if they have no history or set them to DEA and they're no longer active. Okay, so these are some of the things you can do inside of Mainsaver to clean up your data.